Và sau đây là bị dòng tâm sự thao gỡ đến này nè con Mỹ tốt mình chơi với nhau cũng được.
What you just saw is an activity I believe that not just I, but many of us do every day while thinking, scrolling through TikTok. You know that moment when you grab your phone after waking up, during a study break, or when feeling stressed, and suddenly you're deep in TikTok content without even realizing how you got there? Yeah, exactly. And today, I'll be analyzing this daily activity through the lens of consumer behavior theories. So, with no further ado, let's dive in. First, let's begin with how this behavior gets triggered. According to stimulus response model, external stimuli influence internal psychological processes that lead to behavioral responses. In my case, TikTok notification sounds or friends sending TikTok trends can instantly prompt me to open the app, but it's not just external. In the extended model, the internal stimuli can trigger the same response. When I feel overwhelmed or need a mental break, my fingers automatically open TikTok without conscious thought. This is a classic example of how stimuli create predictable behavioral responses in consumers. And the question is, how did this pattern become so rooted? According to behavioral learning theory, our behavior is shaped by repeated exposure to stimuli and responses. And in my case, it is classical conditioning that leads to my habitual behavior. Through classical conditioning, a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a naturally occurring one. For me, TikTok's entertaining content is the unconditioned stimulus, naturally triggering joy and relaxation, which are the unconditioned responses. Over time, neutral cues like the app logo or scrolling action become conditioned stimuli that not trigger those same feelings, even before I watch any content. The repetition of this cycle strengthens the habit and makes it harder to resist. So, what motivates this behavior? Is a mix of internal and external factors. My intrinsic motivation includes pure entertainment, relaxation, and satisfying my curiosity. I generally enjoy the content for its own sake, but there's also extrinsic motivation, that fear of missing out, wanting to be included in conversations about trending content, especially as a communication student. This aligns with the expectancy theory of motivation, which suggests our actions are driven by expected positive outcomes. In my case, that's the belief that TikTok will make me happier or more informed. However, this kind of expectation often acts as a placebo effect, where the brain convinces us that a certain action will bring relief or happiness, even if it doesn't truly deliver. In my case, I believe that using TikTok will make me feel better and more connected, even though in reality, it repeatedly provides only temporary satisfaction and a false sense of social awareness. However, not every video manages to grab my attention. This is explained by perceptual selection, which means our brain filters what we pay attention to due to sensory overload. With so much information coming at us daily, we can't process everything. In today's digital world, feeling overwhelmed is almost unavoidable. So, how does random content manage to catch my eye? That's where perceptual vigilance comes in. This will explain how our current needs and interests influence what we notice. While scrolling, I'm likely to stop for videos that relate to my field of study or my personal interests. TikTok's algorithm takes full advantage of this by tracking what I post for and feeding me more of it, creating a personalized feedback loop that keeps me engaged. Unlike utilitarian consumption that fulfills practical needs, my TikTok usage is primarily hedonic, focused on the experience and emotional response rather than any tangible outcome. When I engage with TikTok, it's not just about gaining information or passing time, it's about the pleasure I get from visually engaging videos, catchy audios, emotionally touching stories, and the excitement of discovering new trends. TikTok doesn't just satisfy a need, it creates a sensory and emotional journey that keeps me coming back. But TikTok doesn't just entertain, it shares my aspirations and self-identity. Influencers are like reference groups, especially aspirational ones. The creators I follow often reflect my ideal self-concept, who I hope to become. Specifically, when I see creators with certain lifestyles or achievements that I consider positive or admirable, they represent versions of that ideal self. This connection explains why I've been influenced to buy skincare products or try life hacks after watching their videos. The influencers have become trusted reference points, and their endorsements hold hold real power because they align so closely with the image I'm striving to build. However, after scrolling for a while, I experienced what consumer psychologists call an approach avoidance conflict, where the consumer desires a goal yet wishes to avoid it at the same time. In the context, I'm simultaneously drawn to TikTok for its rewards while wanting to avoid its negative consequences. Even as I open the app, I'm already anticipating the regret I'll feel afterward about wasted time. This creates a psychological tension where I'm pulled in opposite directions, wanting the immediate gratification but also wanting to avoid the later disappointment. This conflict is particularly interesting because it happens at multiple points: before I open the app, during scrolling, and afterward. Finally, after a long scrolling section, I often experience cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling when my actions contradict my values or beliefs. I value productivity and mindful technology use, yet I just spend 45 minutes watching random videos. To reduce this dissonance, I employ justification mechanisms, telling myself I was just taking a break or I learned something useful to reconcile the time spent versus value received. This post-decision rationalization is a classic consumer behavior pattern that helps me feel better about my choices. Analyzing my TikTok scrolling through these consumer behavior concepts has been eye-opening. What seemed like a simple habit is actually a complex interplay of stimuli, motivations, learned behaviors, and psychological conflicts. By understanding these mechanisms, I can make more conscious choices about my digital consumption. Maybe you can too. Next time you find yourself automatically researching for TikTok, remember these concepts and ask yourself, what's driving this behavior and is it aligned with what truly you value? Thanks for watching.